All right, you guys, happy Wednesday. This week, I couldn't stop thinking about that famous quote from Princess Diana. There were three of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. And to me, it feels like there were three of us in this NCLEX process, so it felt a little crowded. So that led me to our video for this week because they're counting on you not to know the difference. Unfortunately for them, we do. Princess Diana has been on my mind constantly, not because my situation is comparable to her life in any measure, but because of the storytelling behind it. I think about an individual who enters an institution believing the written structure means one thing, then discovers the institution has enormous control over what happens behind the scenes. So, if you're enrolled in nursing school, there's something I wish someone had explained to me before I ever enrolled. Passing your classes does not always mean your school will let you graduate. And without graduation, you may never get the chance to take the NCLEX. And no, this doesn't mean you were accused of cheating, misconduct, felonies, or mispayments, or that you even failed anything. You actually did everything right. Your transcript can be completely done and would be accepted by the Board of Nursing. The only thing that's missing is the actual degree wording on your transcript, that administrative process of that degree and that conferral date. And without that, your school is not giving your ATT, aka your verification to the Board of Nursing, to get your ATT to sit for NCLEX. So who actually controls your path to NCLEX? The school, the Board of Nursing, or NCSBN? And what happens when a school adds an internal requirement between you and that licensing exam that the board itself doesn't even require, that actually no governing body requires or actually supports them in doing this? Before we can understand who's in control, we need to know who's who and what's what. So don't tell me it's required. Tell me who requires it. In other words, show me the rule. Welcome back to the Nursing Investigation. The key bodies here are your nursing school. Let's start there because there's a lot of compelling components to getting your actual nursing license and what that process looks like. So let's start with the basic. Everybody knows what nursing school is, a college that educates you to sit for your NCLEX to hopefully get your license to become a nurse. Your school's responsibility is teaching the curriculum, sets many academic policies, decides whether you have met its graduation requirements, certifies that program completion to the state board when it's required. This is the institution that you actually have the student contract handbook relationship with. This is the school that has their program approved by a bigger governing body like the Board of Nursing or ASIN to what they're teaching you to prepare you to become licensed. They have a environment, an educational system that has to be approved by these governing bodies to be able to say, hey, yes, once these students are done with this program, they can sit for their NCLEX. That's important. Then you have the State Board of Nursing. This is the regulator. It approves nursing education programs under state law and regulates licensure. They have to be approved by the State Board of Nursing at minimum. It determines whether an applicant satisfies the state's requirements to become licensed. This is fundamentally different from accreditation. I do want to point this out. ASIN itself explains that state regulatory approval is generally required for a nursing program to operate, whereas ASIN, the accreditation, is a separate quality assurance process. So that's why I say at minimum, your school needs to be approved by your state's Board of Nursing. That's bare minimum to sit for your NCLEX. Their program that outline what's on your transcript, what financial aid paid for, that program curriculum has to be approved by the state for you to ever sit for your NCLEX. And then on top of that, which this is optional, not every school is ASIN accredited, for example, definitely look into this and ask your school about their specific accreditations. Schools may misrepresent their accreditation by not being forthcoming about this. They may just say, yeah, we're accredited. If you ask them, are we accredited? But they don't always tell you by whom. And if they do, it's somewhere in fine print because nobody knows how to ask the detailed questions like this. ASIN, a lot of nursing students want, and actually I support, because if your school is ASIN accredited, it gives you more opportunities to go to other schools and have your credits transferred to those other schools. If your school is only approved by your state board of nursing, then your credits won't always transfer, or those credits won't always be recognized at other schools. That is very important to know, and something I didn't. So that brings us to the NCSBN, the National Council of State Board of Nursing. This is an important one I think I was missing in getting into nursing school. Who is that? The NCSBN works with the state nursing regulatory bodies and develops and administers the NCLEX, okay? But the NCSBN is not the licensing authority. So the State Board of Nursing determines that eligibility. The NCLEX is the examination mechanism after that. So for students, I think the distinction is basically you go to school, you go to an accredited school, at least by your board of nursing. Then your state board of nursing determines your eligibility to sit for your NCLEX. The NCLEX equals the NCSBN testing process. Now, let's go back to ASIN for a minute. Who is that? Because at the time, I didn't even know what or who they were. ASIN stands for Accreditation Commission for Education in Nursing. So this is a programmatic nursing accreditor, which is why I say a lot of nursing students prefer their schools to be ASIN accredited, because it can take you farther. It looks better, etc., all the things. It's like the gold star of the schools, okay? It's like when you give a hotel or a restaurant a review, it's like having that gold star or that 5 stars. Think about it like that. ASIN can accredit practical nursing programs, RN nursing programs, etc. They can approve diplomas, associates, bachelor's, master's, and clinical doctorate nursing programs. This accreditation is a peer review quality assurance process, not the same thing as state approval or licensure. So again, your school needs to have that bare minimum state approved board of nursing stamp before this even matters. This is like the second step. This is like, okay, now we're approved by the state boards to run this school. Now we need to show our quality of this school and get that ASIN gold star. ASIN specifically says its process is voluntary at the federal level, although a state or other authority may require accreditation in particular circumstances. Now that brings me to CCNE, the Commission on Collegiate Nursing Education, which a lot of people get ASIN and CCNE confused. So CCNE is another program accreditor similar to ASIN, but this is where I think we need to be precise. CCNE is not simply interchangeable with ASIN. CCNE is they primarily deal with collegiate nursing programs like a bachelor's, a bachelor accelerate, I believe another word is you might hear, and graduate levels, certain residency or fellowship programs. So for an LPN or an RN program, ASIN is much more likely to be relevant than CCNE. So if you're in an LPN or RN program, it's more likely for you to find ASIN. And if you are in more of a advanced nursing education model, then you would be looking more for CCNE accreditation. So that brings me to, what's an institutional accreditor? I think this one gets overlooked constantly, and I don't hear very many nursing students or prospective nursing students talking about it. A school itself may have an institutional accreditor, separate from any nursing program accreditor. Federal student aid rules distinguish that an institutional accreditation from programic accreditation. So, for example, I'm going to use New Jersey, for example, because that's where my lawsuit and education took place. New Jersey currently lists Jersey College as institutionally accredited by the Council on Occupational Education, aka you'll see COE, CO. So when somebody says the school is accredited, your immediate question should be, accredited by whom? And is that institution or the nursing program? So let's backtrack a little bit. When you ask if your school is accredited, it's important you ask by whom. Are you accredited by the State Board of Nursing, who approves your program? Are you accredited by ACEN or CCNE? Or are you just institutionally accredited by somebody like the Council on Occupational Education, like CO for New Jersey, for example? In New Jersey, this is the Office of Secretary of Higher Education. We call it OSHE. I don't know how to say it, but it's OSHE. This authorizes institutions to offer college credit and degree programs in New Jersey. New Jersey specifically requires institutions with a physical presence to obtain state licensure before offering those programs. That's different from the Board of Nursing approving a nursing program. So to be approved as a running business, to be an educational institution, is different than having any type of accreditation from ACEN, CCNE, even approval by the Board of Nursing. So now we're already at a couple different forms of oversight. We have permission from the state to operate an educational institution and award degrees. We have that regulatory approval, like the State Board of Nursing, and we also have the accreditation and quality assurance that ACEN and CCNE do. I think this is where the system confuses students. So I feel it's imperative to know how the system works. And we're not done yet. The U.S. Department of Education does not license nurses and generally does not directly accredit colleges itself on its own. It recognizes accrediting agencies for federal purposes and oversees federal student aid eligibility. Its own explanation describes higher education oversight as a triad: federal government, state government, and accrediting agency altogether. Moving forward, I hear a lot of nursing students and prospective nursing students, even nurses, talk about the ANA a lot, the American Nurses Association. A lot of people rely on the ANA for support in whatever they're going through in their nursing journey, and they look to for guidance even. The ANA is a professional association, not the agency that approves your nursing school or decides whether you can ever take your NCLEX. The ANA presents nurses and advocates around the nursing practice, workplace, safety, ethics, health policy, and professional standards. In a graphic, if you can create this visually in your mind, I would put this more under an influence or advocacy bubble, not a licensure authority. They're more supportive. They're more, if you have an issue, they'll come backing with evidence or say, why it should be this way and not this way. This is who you look for for that guidance, for that oversight opinion in the nursing industry, if that makes sense, those standards. And then I hear a lot of nurses, etc., talk about the NLN. This is the National League for Nursing. Their primary focus is on nursing education and nurse educators. It does not research or develop facility development or assessment services, public policy, advocacy, and wait, did I say does or doesn't? It does. Faculty development, assessment services, public policy, advocacy, and educational incentives. So, again, the NLN is influential, but it's not your state board of nursing. It does not issue your nursing license, and this is not your accreditation. The NLN is primarily focused on the education and creating, a system that works, that's going to help the nursing industry grow, that's going to help students learn. They're more on the educational research side and services of that nature. We also have the AACN. This is the American Association of Colleges in Nursing. This is different from ASIN. Despite the very similar alphabet soup I'm now realizing they all have, which makes it even more confusing, the AACN represents academic nursing, especially in the bachelor accelerated programs and graduate nursing education. It develops educational standards such as the AACN Essentials. Again, this is an association, not your licensing board. So the AACN, the NLN, and the ANA are more association. It's more leverage. It's more, we have the grounds and the community and the research and the knowledge, the support, the representatives that represent us. We have them backing us on all of this stuff. So that's what makes us so pertinent to the nursing industry, by association in what we have. Does that make sense? It's more just an association. Like, it looks good. It's kind of like your resume. When you have a full resume and you're applying for the job and you're like, oh, I worked here and here, or I know this person, I have this connection, I've done this, then that makes you more valuable by association. So let's get into the nitty-gritty now that we know who's who and what they do. Who controls that NCLEX eligibility? I wish I knew this a long time ago. Your school controls whether it confers your degree or certifies completion. So this means you can finish your entire nursing program and they can still choose not to confer your degree on your transcript, even though you've completed the program curriculum that financial aid paid for, that the Board of Nursing approved, etc., or certifies your completion to the Board of Nursing. So let's say those girls who did get their degree on their transcript, they then send their paperwork to the Board of Nursing proving they completed that program, so that student can get their ATT to sit for their NCLEX. Now, whether that is right or wrong, it's to be discovered. My personal opinion, observation, and interpretation doesn't feel right to me. That you could put a second door in between, which should really be an easy process, especially when the Board of Nursing controls that NCLEX eligibility at the end of the day. The state board determines who's actually eligible to test. The NCSBN administers the NCLEX. Those are three different roles, and I think students need to understand the difference. The question most students don't ask is, what I would say before you enroll, is there any test, assessment, predictor, exit exam, remediation requirement, or internal policy that can prevent me from graduating, even if I pass my board approved classes and clinical requirements. I think exit exams really matter in this day and age. To me, in my observation, it looks like a loophole for the school never to lose. And the responsibility is always placed on the student and not the quality assurance of the program. Back in the day, exit exams weren't a thing. You finished your program and you took your NCLEX. But now we're in a new day and age. The economy is different, rules are different. Because of technology, people are becoming more advanced. They're becoming more greedy. They're finding more ways to step on people, if you ask me. When I say this phrase metaphorically, they're finding ways to make the most money and keep the reputation, the accreditation. They're finding ways to make sure they never lose and put the responsibility on someone else to take the fall. Literally walking on people to get to the top. That is what it looks like to me. When exit exams don't even matter. The only people they matter to is the school itself. Why is that? No board of nursing says you need to take an exit exam. No nursing student takes the same exit exam. No nursing student needs to have the same exact score to be considered passing. No nursing students take it numerous of times or the same amount of times. No nursing student has the same pathway to taking that. I know some girls, if they fail their exit exam, they can take it the next day, the next week. My school, for example, had me wait about a month. Why is that? The important question is not just whether the school uses one. It's what happened when you fail it, aka when you don't meet the benchmark, which I want to break this down too. If you don't meet a certain benchmark on the exit exam, that doesn't necessarily mean you failed. These test results, from my understanding and interpretation, are based on predictability. If you'll pass your NCLEX the first time. So if you've failed your exit exam or were told you failed, I would really look into that and what those scores really mean. I would challenge it. I would also ask, does it affect your grade? Because now schools are getting smarter. They're using students as test dummies, if you ask me, to find a way around this whole exit exam theory of, well, if we impose this at the very end, we know the students that are most likely to pass the first time, we'll only let them take it. So we don't risk losing our accreditation, or it helps us get accreditation from ASIN, for example, if we don't have it. Now, they're tying exit exams into courses. So like me, for example, on my transcript, to my knowledge, that is the board-approved curriculum I need to sit for my NCLEX. The exit exam wasn't on there because it looks like it wasn't a part of it. Now, to get around that, in my case, when the Board of Nursing found out about this and they started working on this and finally put a regulation into law that nursing schools cannot keep students from graduating due to the exit exam solely, to my understanding and my observation, it looks like to get around that, they started including the exit exam into a course because the exit exam isn't solely keeping you from graduating anymore. Technically, the course is. So if you had a 75% in the course, but you get a lower grade on the NCLEX, on the exit exam, it's going to drop your score below that 75%. So you fail the entire class and you have to retake the class, which is funny because When I didn't pass or meet the benchmark of that exit exam, I had to retake the program from the beginning. So I just find it funny how all of this is working to date. That's your next question. Does it trigger remediation? Because for me, it was starting from the beginning, essentially. Repassing classes I already took. Or can it stop graduation entirely, like in my situation? Will they administratively not put that degree on paper, although it may exist in reality? Those are two different things. In my case, I completed the coursework and clinical requirements, but was prevented from graduating and reaching the NCLEX because of an internal predictive exam requirement. Jersey College disputes aspects of my position and has defended its policies in court, but has since changed their curriculum and has since had to bound themselves to the Board of Nursing's regulation. In New Jersey, the New Jersey Board of Nursing ultimately controls whether you are eligible to sit for NCLEX, not Jersey College itself, and not Pearson VUE, not those who create the NCLEX. I didn't know this at the time. The official NCLEX process separates the roles pretty clearly now that I understand. For my case, Jersey College is my nursing program. It supplies the educational documentation the board requires, typically proof that you completed the approved nursing program. And they didn't do this for me. The transcript exists. I exist. I did all that work. I did everything. But they basically won't make the phone call or write the letter saying that. That's it. That's all we're arguing over. We're not arguing that I failed a nursing clinical or misconduct or tuition that wasn't paid or I have a felony. We're not arguing anything substantial. We are arguing over Jersey College literally releasing my name and paperwork to the Board of Nursing. That's all they have to do. And essentially, if they could put my conferral date and my degree on my transcript, you could say that too. That's literally what we're arguing over, an administrative duty of just telling the board, hey, these are the classes she took and passed, so she can sit for her NCLEX. That's what this whole fight is about. The New Jersey Board of Nursing actually determines whether you meet New Jersey's eligibility requirements and tells NCLEX/Pearson VUE that you are eligible to test. The NCSBN expressly says the nursing regulatory body determines candidate eligibility. So I have a problem with this. When I'm led to believe Jersey College is the only way to sit for my NCLEX, when maybe it's not. Standardly, once you complete nursing school, your school will then send your paperwork, aka your verification, to the Board of Nursing. The Board of Nursing will give your ATT to sit for your NCLEX that NCSBN and Pearson VUE give. So from my understanding, when I completed nursing school and they would not put my degree on the paper or send my paperwork to the Board of Nursing, I was told essentially it was a dead end. I would have to retake and repay for the program, do it all over again. That's it. Nothing I did matters. Repay and retake classes I've already paid for and passed? That's ludicrous. Now, to date, what I find out is the Board of Nursing is the ultimate decider. So you're telling me all of this time went by and I was told that I had no other option but retake the program, go to a different school, when maybe that's not the case? If the board ultimately approves your NCLEX eligibility, why was that not relayed to me as such? Why? How can a school, this is what it feels like to be me. This is what's going on in my head. How can the school say that's it instead of being like, I'll give the school what we have and that's it. Like, how can they put in a second door preventing you? Like, how can they make the process harder for you? If NCLEX essentially holds your eligibility status, I mean, if the Board of Nursing essentially holds your eligibility status, your Board of Nursing, why can the school make the process harder if they're not the ones actually deciding it at the end? How does that make sense? If you do the work, confer the degree, and leave it in the board's hands. If you think I'm not qualified enough to take it, what does that matter? Everybody has an opinion. If you think somebody who completed nursing school isn't qualified to take their NCLEX, although you run a nursing school, that makes zero sense to me. It's still summer, guys. So then it's like, all this time that's gone by, and how many students were led to believe they couldn't just challenge the board into sitting for their NCLEX? I don't think you should be able to throw students in a disarray and make them think they have to redo nursing school or anything for that matter, because what if that isn't true? What if you can challenge the Board of Nursing? What if, like me, you pass the accredited portion and curriculum and program of your nursing school, right? Everything the board approved, everything financial aid paid for, you pass that part. But they don't want to give you your degree. They don't want to send your verification, do the actual paperwork to send to the Board of Nursing. What if you could challenge the board and say, here's my transcript, here's another student's transcript. They're equally the same as a practicing nurse now. Why can't I take mine? Because the school won't do an administrative duty? Does that sound logical to you? What if you can challenge the board? What if you just take the school right out of the equation? Now, what they owe you for lost time, etc., and other things can be figured out separately. But as far as getting the license, what if there's a way to do it, cutting the middleman out that isn't even supposed to be there anyway? As far as Pearson VUE goes, they handle the registration. They send the ATT after the board makes you eligible and administers and schedules the exam. Pearson does not independently decide whether your nursing education qualifies you. So essentially, if I have the completed education, I just need to talk to the board themselves. What happens after that will be fine, because as long as the board verifies me, then NCSBN will send that ATT to sit for my NCLEX. I think that distinction is especially important to my Jersey College issue, and I think it should be an essential education that each institution provides, and this isn't missing in the shadows, so nobody can misinterpret how this process works, so nobody's taken advantage of, if that makes sense. You should know who controls what rule is where, who can do what, who can't do something to you without throwing students in a disarray or confusing them to keep them from doing something to benefit you, if that makes sense. That's just how I think. That's what goes on in my head. These are questions I ask. The school can control a document without controlling NCLEX eligibility. Hold on. I'm starting to get a little upset. Aggravated emotions are coming. It all floods back to me. The school can control a document without controlling NCLEX eligibility. There are actually two different kinds of control. The legal regulatory authority is the New Jersey Board of Nursing that decides whether you may take the licensing examination. The board is the state agency that licenses LPNs or RNs, for example. A nursing school can prevent the board from reaching that decision if it refuses to certify that you completed the program or refuses to transmit whatever completion documentation the board requires. And it's so funny because this is how I think of it. Imagine having a baby, doing 9 months of growing a child inside you. You have the child, and then the hospital says, we're not giving the kid and you a birth certificate, or like, we're not putting your name on the birth certificate because we feel like you're going to be a bad mom anyway. So we're just not going to do that for you. Huh? The fact that anybody could have the right to do that baffles me. Like, how has nobody fought for this before? So Jersey College could effectively block my path upstream, but come to find out, that doesn't mean Jersey College itself possesses the statutory authority to decide. Clarissa is competent, incompetent to sit for NCLEX, whatever they argue. But the current New Jersey exit exam regulation makes that distinction unusually explicit. NJAC 1337-121 says a nursing program can require a comprehensive examination to assess a student's knowledge, but the student's performance on that exam cannot affect the student's eligibility to graduate or take the licensing examination. So I ask, where does that leave me now? Well, that is what I'm working on. During this downtime, as we are waiting for verbal arguments in the appellate court, it is something I've continued to work on and navigate through and start that process. And all I can do is wait. So in the meantime, I think it raises questions that when I enrolled in nursing school, who they were accredited by, when this regulation came forth into questions after students like myself made complaints, when they took this act of making it right, when it became into regulation, and in the plain language of this regulation, what that means. I may not even essentially be fighting those days back in 2020, 2021, but in present time, if you can't withhold my nursing education due to an exit exam, how are you still doing that? So it's conflicting. I have something here that says you can't do that, but you're still doing it in present time. Forget the past for a minute. Let's just live in today. What does that mean? So that brings me to a lot of other questions I think every student should ask before paying tuition, before investing your time, energy, literally anything into any nursing school. Questions I didn't know to ask before. Question number 1. Can any exam other than my course prevent graduation? Is there anything inside your nursing curriculum that isn't approved by your accreditors, like the Board of Nursing or ASIN, or anything that isn't included in my financial aid? Are you having me take anything outside of the program curriculum that could withhold my degree from me? If I have to take an exit exam, how many attempts do I get? Some schools make it 4, some make it 5, some make it 3. Some let you take it as many times as you need to. As long as you pass it, they'll let you go, which triggers another feeling for me. Why are we even putting a number on it? If you want to meet your students halfway, I feel a more logical pathway is, all right, keep taking it until you meet this benchmark. But to say you get 1 chance, 2, 3, 4, 5 chances, like, who decides that's your last chance and that's where the journey ends? When you can keep taking your NCLEX as many times as you need to until you pass. What happens? Question number 3. What happens if I fail the exit exam but pass the course? 4. Can the policy change after I enroll? 5. What percentage of students who start the program actually graduate and become eligible for NCLEX? What's your attrition rate? What's your retention rate? What percentage of students who actually enroll in your nursing program actually graduate at the end? That is much different than an NCLEX pass rate, because that NCLEX pass rate only accounts for students who have graduated and passed their NCLEX. What happened to all the girls in the middle? Question 6, is there anything outside of the program curriculum you require for graduation? Like we spoke about earlier. 7, do you have an arbitration agreement? 8, can I opt out of pieces of the contract, even the arbitration agreement? 9, whom are you accredited by? 10, what records should I save? I can actually answer this for you. Everything. Everything you learned, every email, every phone call, and if you can't save it, write it down. 11, how behind on payments can I get before you kick me out or even make me start all over? 12, what does remediation mean? If I fail a course, how many times can I retake it? What is the remediation pathway? Do I have to retake everything? Can I just retake the test that I failed, etc.? Do you round up? Because I know some nursing students have failed, let's say, have been considered failed, but let's say they had a 75% in the class and they got like a 74.99 on their last exam, and now they have a 74.99 in the course, for example, and they failed them. So does your school round up? Will they give you extra credit or let you take it again? What does that look like if that happens to you? Because it can. 13, always ask, who made this rule? Anything somebody at an institution is telling you in management, in the administrative office, ask them, who made this rule? Why do I have to follow that? Where is the regulation? Was it the nursing school? Was it the Board of Nursing? Was it the state? Was it an accreditor? Was it NCSBN? Who's allowing you to do this? Who gives you the authority to make me do this? Why is this a rule? Nursing students spend tens of thousands of dollars and years of their lives on these programs. You should know every condition attached to graduation before you sign everything, because I don't care what the opposing argument is that I wasn't fully invested. I was very little invested. That's not true at all. That was not my experience. My investigation started with what happened to me, but from here on out, I wanted to help other students know what questions to ask before they ever end up where I did, because apparently we're sophisticated enough when they need signatures, but suddenly incapable of understanding the system when we start to question it. How can a student be sophisticated enough to sign an arbitration agreement, class action lawsuit, etc., all these legal things in tiny font, all this legal framework she's never heard before? She's sophisticated enough to sign it without any legal training, without any lawyer, but she's not sophisticated enough to take her NCLEX when she's completed a board-approved education curriculum and her transcript matches the transcript of practicing nurses to date. Princess Diana learned there was a difference between the crown and the people controlling the palace. And apparently, nursing school has its own version of that problem, because for years, I thought Jersey College decided whether I was qualified to take the NCLEX, except there's one problem. They don't administer the NCLEX. They don't issue the nursing license, and they're not the New Jersey Board of Nursing in my case. So tonight, we're figuring out who actually had authority and how a school could control that doorway anyway, how they made themselves a key. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Great. Then explaining it shouldn't be difficult. I'll wait.